It was a Friday after school, which meant video games, pizza, and talking to my friends all night on the phone. I had just got off the bus and I had the house to myself. My parents were still at work. My mom doesn't usually get home till after 5 o'clock, along with my dad usually around 6:30. My older brother wasn't there either. I honestly have no idea where he was, but he was an adult, so he could have been doing anything. As soon as I got home, I jumped right in bed and got into comfy clothes, like sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt that would be too big for me to wear in public. This was seriously one of the best feelings to me as a kid. Don't get me wrong, I loved school and seeing my friends, but there is just something nice about being home after a long week of school. I went to a Catholic school, so the dress code was very strict. That's why as soon as I would get home, I liked to change my clothes. Mom would also get upset if I was wearing my school clothes around the house anyways. I did my usual routine of taking a shower, relaxing a bit, and eating some snacks while I waited for my friends to get online so we could play video games. My mom got home a little bit earlier than I expected, and she said that her and my dad were going to be going out to some sort of party that was a few hours away. My dad showed up not much later after my mom as well. I was stoked about them going to a party because that meant I would have the house to myself all night. My parents left for the party around 7 o'clock that night. They told me to be safe and they gave me a hug before they left and said that they will be out pretty late and if anything were to happen to call our neighbor, emergency-wise. Of course, I would call my parents as well, but they wouldn't be much help if they were 2 hours away. We are really close with our neighbors and we have been for a long time. My parents have known them since before I was born, and we consider them like family. I reassured my mom that everything was going to be okay and that they deserve to have a nice night out. They both work really hard and have always been great parents. A couple hours after they had been gone, I started to get tired. My plans of staying awake all night and pulling an all-nighter had failed. I was way more tired than usual and I didn't care to fight sleep. I lied awake in my bed for a little while, texting my friends and scrolling through social media and watching YouTube videos. When all of a sudden, I heard a car outside. I jumped up out of bed thinking that it was my mom and dad and that they were finally home. I peeked out the blinds from my window and I rubbed my eyes. I didn't recognize the vehicle at all. Then they pulled into the driveway. As soon as they did, the headlights of the car shined right at me and I very quickly moved my head away from the window. Who in the heck is at my house right now? Called my mom, but no answer. At first I wondered if maybe my parents had drank too much, so maybe they had someone drive them home. But I thought that was very unlikely as they weren't big drinkers. I peeked my eye out of the blinds ever so slightly to where I could just barely see outside, all while trying to remain unnoticed. A few seconds after that, the car revved their engine and backed out of the driveway and sped off and continued down our street. We live off of a back road in a very small subdivision, and there's only like 3 streets in our entire neighborhood, and my street only has like 8 or 9 houses on it. If you were approaching our house, we are the third to the last house on the right side of our street, and our street has a dead end. I thought that maybe they were just drunk or high and trying to figure out where they were going or something. Oh man, that couldn't have been further from the truth. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they definitely weren't lost. I found that out about 20 minutes later. All I could see was that the car drove towards the end of the street, where the dead end met the dark wooded trail. I couldn't see that far though from my window or from any of the other windows in the house, and I most definitely wasn't going to step outside to investigate. I realized that things like this may happen from time to time, where someone pulls into your driveway because maybe they need to turn around or get situated, or like 10 other things that they could be doing. But I had a serious and horrible gut-wrenching feeling about it. There was never much traffic on our street, and it was late at night, and with me being home alone, I was concerned. Sure enough time had passed by for me to forget about the car and for me to almost doze off to sleep, when all of a sudden, I heard someone yelling in the house. It took me a few minutes to finally realize what was going on because I was so startled and still half asleep, but someone had broken into our home. I jumped out of bed quicker than I thought was even possible. I swear I could literally hear my own heartbeat thumping. That's how freaked out I was. I had to act fast, and I knew that time was ticking. My only option was to run. I didn't have anything to fend for myself really, and I had nowhere to hide. Our house is quite small in comparison to your average American-sized home, so I knew it was only a matter of minutes before the intruder would find me, vulnerable. But that's if I was lucky. He could step through my bedroom door at any second now, and I knew that. My mom finally started calling me back, and my phone rang. I didn't answer it because I didn't want to alert the intruder. I was just praying to God that whoever was inside with me didn't hear my phone go off. I ran over to my window and I swung the blinds open and attempted to open my window so I could escape to safety. For whatever reason, though, I couldn't get the damn thing to open. I had never opened my window before and it was locked, but I couldn't for the life of me unlock it. No matter how hard I tried to turn the lever, it just wouldn't budge. I knew I was in some serious trouble now. I needed to buy myself some time, desperately, before the man found me alone. I slid my dresser across the floor and put it in front of the door to act as a barricade, and I was hoping that would be enough to stop him from getting in my room if he tried. I didn't have a closet in my room, so the only place I could hide was under my bed. I thought that was too obvious and that would probably be the first place someone would look, but I had no other option. I heard footsteps on the hard-wooded floor walking down the hall towards my room, and then a loud and aggressive knock following the brief moment of silence. He knocked so hard and it scared me so much I had to cover my mouth before I let out a desperate scream. Then he started messing with the door handle trying to get in, but to no avail. He then started speaking to me. "Hey, I know you're in there. How about you just let me inside and make this 10 times easier for the both of us?" While I was under the bed, I managed to whip my phone out and call the police. To my luck, there was an officer only a mile or two away and he got here in minutes. But still, those minutes felt like ages. The man kept screaming at me, telling me to open the door and to let him in. One of the officers finally arrived and made his way inside, along with 3 other policemen that showed up one by one right after one another, separated by only a few minutes. The officer made it very clear of his entry and yelled police. Apparently the intruder left the door wide open and that's how the police officer let himself in. Only a few minutes later, the cop found the man who was still standing at my bedroom door and ordered him to get on his knees. The man lunged at the officer and the cop had no choice but to shoot him. The man was taken to the hospital and I gave the police my statement. I called my mom and my parents rushed home. The man ended up surviving the gunshot wound and he is currently sitting in jail right now awaiting trial. My mom got us the best lawyer around and we are going to nail his ass to the coffin in court. I hate staying home alone nowadays, I'm sure you can see why. Years ago, my parents had their garage converted into an extra large bedroom / hangout area. And this is where we all played video games and my parents threw parties. I was about 10 years old and it was only the second or third time I had been left alone in the house while my siblings were all away for one reason or another. Naturally, I was up all night playing on our PS2 in there, having a blast. I don't know how late, but pretty late into the night, I suddenly started hearing someone tapping on the window. My parents really went all out with the extra bedroom and actually replaced the garage door with a wall, window, and a traditional front door you'd find on any house, complete with bolt and doorknob locks. Well, I didn't realize it was a sound not produced by my game for a full minute or two, as the thought of some creeper being outside didn't even cross my mind as an innocent child. The best way I could describe the sound is, it sounded like someone was drumming their fingers in sort of a pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 again, but really quickly. And it kept going without stopping. Seriously, this sound continued for probably around 5 minutes. I finally realized that the sound wasn't coming from my game when the doorknob rattled with a knock. I freaked right the hell out when I snuck to the door to double check the locks. They were both unlocked, but the door had a tendency to jam and act like it was locked, unless you put a lot of effort into it. I locked both locks loudly so that the person on the other side would know that they had a 0% chance of getting in. Then I heard an overwhelming sigh of an older man, and then a really disturbing laugh following after it. Then the knocking got louder. We're talking about banging now. He was wailing on the door, probably as hard as he could. I just stood there in fear, and then it stopped. He moved to one of the nearby windows and tried to look through it, but it was covered with a blanket. I could see the shadow of him though, and I was absolutely terrified. Not knowing what to do, I was frozen with fear. Then he moved back to the door, and that's when he said, "Let me in, love. I'm cold and hungry. Don't you want to be nice to your neighbor?" I turned off the light, ran to my room, and I hid in my pitch black closet under my blanket until my parents got home a few hours later from their anniversary date. I never told them about what happened because I was young enough to care more about getting in trouble because I stayed up past my bedtime. Last year I was renting a house in a small economically depressed, old mining town in Virginia. I lived alone. On one of the first warm nights of spring, I fell asleep in my living room on my recliner, but I unpleasantly awoke around 4 a.m. to the sound of my doorknob turning. I figured someone must have just had the wrong address or something, but the doorknob kept turning persistently. I didn't have a peephole or a window to see who was outside, so I just approached the door from the inside and yelled, "Hey, wrong place." Then the door started shaking violently and a hand began punching it. "Hey, seriously, get the hell off my property, wrong house." The man who was on the other side then growled at me and started making these weird and horrifying noises like a wild animal. I grabbed a knife from my kitchen drawer and called the police, and I waited inside for them to arrive. 2 officers showed up, but by the time they arrived, the person was gone. The cops did a sweep around the house and looked for him thoroughly, but there was nobody. They left, and the police told me to call again if something comes up. So I went on about my day, and by now it was around 5 o'clock in the morning. I didn't go back to sleep because I was just too anxious about the whole situation. Later that evening, when I got home from work, I was concerned that maybe someone broke in. Now that was nothing more than my anxiety talking, and I had no reason to believe that, but that's all I could think about all day at work, was that that same person was going to come back. Well, when I got home, everything seemed normal. No signs of anyone or a break-in or anything suspicious at all. Fast forward later into the night, around 9:30, 10 o'clock-ish. I was lying down on my couch reading one of my books, when all of a sudden I heard a strange thud sound. It was very quick, but quite loud. It sounded like it came from inside, but I wasn't sure. I forgot about it and I continued reading. Not very long after that, I heard the sound of someone talking, but it was muffled and I couldn't make out a word they were saying. Where the hell is that coming from, I asked myself. Okay, now I knew I wasn't insane. I knew there was someone there. I started to panic, and I had a horrible feeling that that strange unknown person came back. I looked around, but the sound stopped completely. Then, out of nowhere, I heard this vicious scream that I have never heard anything like before. Imagine a man was screaming at the top of their lungs as loud as they possibly could, in the most demonic yet humanly way possible. Now my adrenaline was through the roof, practically in overdrive. And then, I had a sudden realization. Oh shit. The only thing that came to my mind was the crawl space. I wanted to call the police, but at the same time, I didn't want to end up looking stupid again. So I decided I was going to try and handle it myself for the time being. I walked outside of my back door and then went around the house, because it would have been much easier for me to enter the crawl space from outside rather than from inside. I had actually never seen the inside of the crawl space up until this moment. There was a guy who appeared to be sleeping or pretending to or something. Or maybe he was just on a crap ton of drugs, which, thinking back, I'm sure was the case. I managed to control my frustration and I didn't say a word to him. I called the police immediately and stepped out of the crawl space area. I waited around for them, and when they showed up, I showed them the man I was talking about. The cops dragged him out of there and sent him to the hospital to be checked out, and then to jail. This man had been practically living underneath my house for I don't even know how long. He had a sleeping bag down there, a lantern, and a bunch of food that he had stored away. I was horrified when I found this out, and I couldn't get a good night's sleep for weeks. How the hell did I not notice he was down there all this time? "20 years ago, I went to prison for the disappearance of my best friend. When it happened, I tried to explain exactly how it went down, but nobody believed me. Eventually, I caved in from being coerced by my interrogators and confessed to their version of events, and I pled no contest to the charges. Now that I'm finally free, even though the life I used to have no longer exists, I'm finally capable of sharing the true story. His name was Bennett, and we grew up together. Neither of us were strangers to crime. Most of what we did was petty stuff. We never robbed or killed anyone, but we had our habits and our hustles. Truthfully, we didn't do any of it because we had to. Both of us were from some pretty well-off families, and we just found it fun to break the rules sometimes. One thing we particularly enjoyed doing together was breaking into construction sites and abandoned buildings. We'd built up some confidence with that, and we never got caught doing any of it. Well, that was until we broke into the abandoned police station. The police department had just finished building a brand new station a mile or so down the road from the old one, which was built in the 40s, and it had already been outgrown by the size of the town many years ago. That meant there was this 60-year-old building with a ton of dark history that was now completely deserted. Bennett and I couldn't resist. We bought a knockoff Polaroid camera to capture some eerie images, and we wore empty backpacks to gather souvenirs. Getting in was easy. The fence was topped with barbed wire, so we cut the chain at the gate and slipped right through. Then we smashed the locks on the front door, which wasn't equipped with any alarms. Right away, we were like degenerate kids inside of an illegal candy store. We dug through the ancient records in the booking station, trashed the sheriff's office, and we tried to find abandoned weapons in the armory, but all we found were some billy clubs. Then we found the jail cells. There were 4 of them lined up on one wall with the classic steel bars. Not only that, but on the far wall were the keys to the cells, just hanging there on a hook. Bennett and I started giggling like schoolchildren, thinking of everything we could do with the space. We decided to play cop and criminal, where one of us would lock the other one up in the cell and pretend to be a piggish deputy. We challenged each other to rock, paper, scissors to see who would be who, and I won, so of course I wanted to be the cop. I immediately started playing the character and ordered the criminal Bennett, who pretended to be in handcuffs, to get in his cell. Then I closed the gate behind him and I locked it with the keys. I could tell that Bennett was a little worried that I would intentionally leave him in there, but he tried to hide it and he kept the amusement going. We were lifelong friends, so I knew he trusted me. I wanted to mess with him though, so I told him to have fun rotting and I walked away. Then I went to the sheriff's office and kicked my feet up on the desk. A little while later, Bennett started yelling like a jailbird. "You better let me out, you goddamn pig," he shouted, his voice echoing through the cinder block halls. "Shut up, you waste of flesh. You'll get out when you can pay your bail," I hollered back. "You didn't give me no bail, you bastard," Bennett complained, chuckling a little bit. "I know, 'cause all your money is stolen." I couldn't help but smile myself after that. "No it ain't, you can't prove that." "Not yet," I yelled, and then for a moment, Bennett didn't reply. But then out of nowhere, he dropped the act. "I'm serious, man, let me out, please. I can't take it in here anymore." A chill ran down my spine from the tone of his voice. I knew that he was being dead serious, so I got up from the desk and I ran down the hall to unlock the cell to let him out. But when I got there, he was gone. The cell door was still locked, but Bennett was gone. I started to panic, so I opened it up and I went inside to see if he was hiding under the bed, but he was nowhere to be found. "Bennett," I called out, "where are you?" There wasn't a single sound in reply, except the echo of my own voice. Then the sound of the door sliding shut behind me. I rushed to the door to keep it from closing on me, and I managed to put my hand in the way in the last second, causing the door to crush my wrist. I cried out in pain, then I pulled the door open, but for some reason, it was like there was someone fighting against me, trying to shut it. When I finally got free, I was full of fear and adrenaline. I didn't even go looking for Bennett. We always agreed that if things went south, we would take care of ourselves and meet up later, but Bennett never showed up. Days went by, then weeks. The police investigation of his disappearance led straight to me, and from there, you can already tell where the story's going. I got pinned for it, and even though I know I'm not responsible, I've always believed that there's nobody else on this plane of existence that should have taken the blame. Whatever got him almost got me too. Sometimes I wish it would have. In my career as a sheriff's deputy, I've seen and done more than my fair share of disturbing and traumatizing things. Of course, I've never really been able to share my experiences with many people, other than my wife and a few members of the force. But now that I'm retired, I've decided to write down the ones that have stuck with me the most over the years. This was just one day on the job. It wasn't a call that we weren't expecting. It didn't come out of the blue at all. In fact, most of us had been itching to take care of this issue for months, but we had been forced to wait for a warrant. There was this abandoned house in one of the neighborhoods we would patrol. The owners of the house died and they didn't leave the property to anyone, so it got foreclosed by the bank, who didn't touch it for far too long. Until they finally decided to mark it for demolition, when it had gotten to the point that it was about to fall over on its own. We got the warrant for the raid based on the testimony of the contractor who went inside the house for a pre-demo inspection and came running to the station looking like he'd seen a ghost. From what the inspector said, we all had the same idea of what we were getting into. On the surface, it was obviously your typical trap house. We expected to find all sorts of drugs and squatters and illegal firearms, which we did. So we came prepared to make arrests. However, we could never have been ready for the full extent of what we discovered. We circled the house with about 8 squad cars, plus a SWAT van from the next county over. It was the middle of the day, but none of the occupants even noticed what was happening outside. I wasn't on the front line, but I was several men behind the SWAT guys who announced our presence at the door before breaking it down. We only gave them about 15 seconds of warning them from the first shout to the door being rammed open, but that was enough time for several of the occupants to get up and scramble for the back door, where we of course had officers waiting to capture them. The SWAT guys charged in, and they scared any of the rest of them from even thinking about putting up a fight. By the time I got in there were about a dozen people left on the first floor of the house, and they were all on the ground and frozen already. However, it wasn't yet time for me to start cuffing them and getting them out of there. Immobilizing them with zip ties was the job of the officers who came in after me, because even though the ground floor was secure, the house wasn't clear yet. There was a basement. While the other guys cleaned up the first floor, I backed up the SWAT team with another deputy, which was my partner at the time, as the armored men continued their march, heading down the stairs into the space below the house. I remember my heart was racing the whole time, like it would on any other high-intensity raid like that. I could feel the sweat soaking through my clothes, and it was like I could see 360 degrees all around me. But there was a distinct change in the air as I made my way down those steps. The SWAT team felt it too. They slowed their pace noticeably as we descended. The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up, and I noticed the eerie quietness of the space I was entering, broken only by the noise from upstairs. I was overcome by a smell too, a stench really. It was so distinct, but I didn't want to admit that I knew exactly what it was. For a moment, it was pushed out of my mind. The SWAT team started shouting at somebody, and I realized there was a man trying to escape the basement through one of the egress windows, but he was too overweight to fit through quick enough. Before he could get his midsection unstuck, I ran up, and with the help of my partner, yanked him down by the feet, sending him crashing to the floor, where we immediately tied his hands and feet together as per protocol. After a few more seconds, the tentative all clear was given, and it was time to start clearing out the arrested individuals and begin the investigation. At that exact moment in time, I was distracting myself from what I already knew by griping with my partner about having to eventually get the fat man we just arrested up the stairs. But he didn't even have time to respond. Off to the side, one of the SWAT members started going ballistic, shouting and cussing, and all of a sudden running over to the immobilized man and picking him up by the collar, screaming into his face. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I heard him growl, almost like he was about to cry, but the fat man didn't respond. My partner and I were stunned for a critical few seconds and didn't move to do anything. I knew we were both thinking, what could get to a guy like that who might as well be a trained soldier? Then the fat man with the blood pouring from his nose, face planting against the ground during his arrest, spat in the SWAT member's face, right in his visor. In an instant, the SWAT member lashed out and struck the man in the head with the butt of his rifle, effectively disabling him completely. I'm positive he would have kept on going and beaten him to death too if it weren't for the rest of the SWAT team rushing over to pull him off. By then, I was starting to feel an uneasy shakiness in my knees, and I knew that soon I'd have to accept the truth of what triggered that man's rage. That stench I noticed earlier, I had recently become quite familiar with it. My first son had just been born a few months prior, and the odor of infant fecal matter is quite recognizable. The SWAT team escorted their unhinged comrade back up the stairs and left me alone with my partner and the unconscious man we had just arrested. And all of a sudden, our surroundings came into focus. All around us were cribs, 6 of them lined up against the walls of the cramped and dingy basement. In horror, we looked into them, and what we saw has given me nightmares ever since. There were children in each of the cribs, and more than one in some of them, ranging from infants to toddlers. They were all in terrible distress and covered in feces. The reason we hadn't heard them crying in the chaos of the raid was because they were all, every single one of them, gagged by pacifiers, which were held in place over their mouths by cordage that was wrapped so tightly it was digging into their skin in some cases. Some of them were even tied up with bungee cords. I immediately felt so lightheaded that I almost couldn't continue standing. I wanted so badly to believe that what I was seeing couldn't be reality. I vaguely heard my partner call out for backup, but I forgot about doing my job. All I could think to do was pick up the baby that was squirming so helplessly in front of me and take out their pacifier so they could finally cry through their immense suffering. I cradled them in my arms and I tried to console them, and this is the sight and sound that many of my comrades on the force witnessed when they came rushing down the stairs. Through the investigation, it was found that many of the drug addicts that were squatting in that house had formed a sort of twisted, heinously neglectful daycare center for their unwanted children so they could get high in peace. All the children were put into the foster care system, and none of us ever saw any of them again. But I know for a fact that each of us has wondered about their fate every day since. I know I have. During the lockdown, my life was actually going pretty good in the first few weeks. I got together with my girlfriend just in time, right around when everything was closed and there was nothing else to do, which meant we had ample time to spend together in our budding relationship. I had recently started driving too, so it was kind of perfect. It was the end of our senior year in high school, and we both just turned 18 a few months ago. We had almost no responsibilities. We would drive all around town and enjoy the lack of people, relish in each other's company, and of course, find secluded spots to park my car and be hidden from prying eyes. I'm sure anyone could imagine why. Unfortunately, that would end up bringing all the good times crashing down. It still seems so ridiculous and unfair that I get mad thinking about it even now. But there's nothing I can do to change it. So I figured I should share my story as a reminder that cops can be both unavoidable and insufferable assholes that will literally get off to ruining your life over the most minor of crimes. It was a night not too unlike any other. We were pulled up in the rear parking lot of a park in the neighborhood by our school, which was pretty dark at night, so we never thought that anyone would ever be able to see us. This particular night, before we got to our destination, knowing it was a Friday night and wanting to make it feel special despite the fact that all the days back then were running together, we bought a bottle of that knockoff Fireball and picked up an eighth of weed. Another factor that did us in was that we were chronically blowing off both of our friend groups. It seemed like it didn't matter when my girlfriend's friends called her up and asked her a bunch of questions about where she was and ragged on her for not going out with them. What we didn't know was that they were so mad at her not partying with them that they literally called the cops on us, saying that I was some kind of drug dealer. We had no idea this was happening, so after she got off the phone, we walked out into the park, smoked a joint, and drank the whole bottle under the cover of darkness. Then we returned to my car and got in the back seat, where we started cuddling, then making out. Then we started taking off all of our clothes to go all the way. We were in the middle of doing it when I saw out of the corner of my eye 3 cops pulling into the parking lot with their lights off. I stopped what I was doing, stunned. Before I knew it, they surrounded my car, so there was no hope of even driving away. I quickly told my girlfriend what was happening, and we both rushed to put our clothes back on, but it was too late. The cops started banging on the doors and shining their flashlights through the windows, completely exposing both of us. We were caught in the act. They shouted at us to get out of the car while we were still half naked. We were as freaked out as we could have been, so we panicked and we just decided to do what they said. As soon as I opened the door, this one big fat pig of a cop ripped me out of the car and threw me on the ground, handcuffing me immediately. My girlfriend was screaming and refused to get out of the car after seeing that, which led the other cops to reach in and yank her out. I couldn't see anything but the dirt in my eyes, but I could hear her struggling and trying to grab onto anything she could. But eventually, they overpowered her and handcuffed her on the ground as a sobbing mess. Then they put all their flashlights on us so that all the people in the neighborhood around us who woke up from the screaming would be able to see exactly what was going on. Then they started asking us a million questions. I was so shell-shocked that I couldn't really think of what would have been the right thing to say. Their questions ended up with them searching my entire car while they left us on the ground. They found the weed and the empty bottle of alcohol, which I claimed to be mine immediately to save my girlfriend from any further trouble. They breathalyzed me, and since I was under 21 and even had a detectable amount of alcohol in my system, that meant I was immediately slapped with a DUI, and I got my license revoked, barely 3 months after I got it. On top of that, I was hit with a drug charge because of the weed. My girlfriend and I were both charged with trespassing because for some reason it's against the law to be in a park after dark. But the worst part of all this is because we were caught having sex in my car there, we were both charged with indecent exposure and committing a lewd act, which we ended up getting convicted for. That means we are now both registered sex offenders for the rest of our lives, just because we were having sex with each other in the back seat of my car, which I swear to God had such tinted windows that nobody could ever see us, especially at night. And you might be thinking that a lot of these charges could have been dropped, but the cop that yanked me out of my car was so proud of his actions that when he showed up to the court date, he convinced the judge there was a mountain of evidence against me, proving that I was a total degenerate. He pointed to the open container violation, the intoxicated driving even though I wasn't driving, the marijuana, the indecent exposure, the trespassing, the anonymous tip from the friend that betrayed us, and the resisting arrest too. So the judge decided that at 18 years old, I needed to go to jail for 6 months and be on probation for years. The only silver lining is that my girlfriend avoided going to jail, and since she wasn't a minor, I avoided a much more serious charge. However, she was so traumatized by this event that she dumped me all while I was in jail. Just goes to show, cops are always looking for an excuse, so be careful out there. I used to rent out my garage apartment as an Airbnb. For the most part, I never had any major problems, so I never put the bookings through much scrutiny before accepting them. However, if I ever decide to host on Airbnb again, that would be something I change about the way I do things. I'm sure it was only a matter of time before I had an experience with a guest that was so deranged and so downright disturbing that I had to stop hosting, just so I would never have to deal with anything like it ever again. The guest in question was this guy I'll refer to as Kyle. He was a single man in his early 30s that wanted to stay for a week. He didn't mention that he was traveling or anything, he just said he badly needed a place to stay, which was a little unusual, but I didn't think much of it. When I met him to check in, he didn't have much stuff either, just a duffel bag, a backpack, and busted up bicycle. I could tell just by looking at him that he was in the rough spot, maybe even homeless, which made me wonder how he afforded the fee. He seemed like he hadn't showered or taken care of himself in a few weeks, and in general, his demeanor was quite skittish. However, at that point, he wasn't rude at all, he was actually quite gracious and appreciative. Despite him being this way, I didn't treat him any different. After I gave him the usual tour, I left him to his own and I told him to do his own thing like I would tell anyone else. Unfortunately, as the days went by, I gradually realized that Kyle was going to be problematic. could hear music blasting from inside constantly, and no matter how many times I texted him to turn it down, he never did. When I knocked on the door to tell him in person, I would see his shadow moving around inside and hear him frantically rummaging through stuff like he was trying to hide something. But he didn't answer the door. I debated entering with my own key, but I decided against it. It was really starting to get on my nerves more than anything, since I never had to do that before. But the biggest red flag that I should have taken more seriously was the smell that emanated from the door. It was like burning plastic or something. I had no idea what that stench could be coming from at the time, but afterwards it became very clear what he was doing in there and what was causing it. I should have kicked him out a lot sooner, but after several days, I figured I would just let him stay until the end of his booking since it wasn't too far away. After he'd been there for a week, it was finally time. Guests usually just leave when it comes time to check out, and I was thankful for not having to interact with him again. I was also glad that the obnoxious music had finally stopped, but I was nervous about going in and seeing what kind of mess he made. I had to go in and look though, because I was the only one who was going to clean it up, and let me just say, I was appalled. The entire place was trashed. All the furniture had been moved around. There was junk all over the place. Food stuck to just about every surface in the kitchen, and one of the pots was completely ruined from being caked in this white substance that I couldn't identify for the life of me. The whole apartment reeked too. With how bad of a shape the garage was in, I was dreading to look in the bathroom. Strangely, when I got there, the door was locked. Annoyed, I left for a minute to go into my house and grab a bobby pin so I could unlock the door. But when I got back, the bathroom door was open. A chill ran down my spine and I was suddenly very on edge. Just then, I heard a noise from the kitchen that made my heart sink. It was glass breaking. I crept through the hallway and stopped at the corner, then slowly peeked around to look, just to see Kyle standing there with a broken bottle in one hand and a metal baseball bat in the other. When I looked in his eyes, I could tell he was twisted on something, and seeing me caused him to go ballistic and start screaming at me. "Who are you? Get out of my house. Don't mess with me, I swear to God I'll kill you." I started to back away toward the door, avoiding any sudden movements while I tried to explain myself. "Kyle, it's me. The host. I let you stay here, remember?" "I don't remember you. Don't try to trick me," he said. "I'm not lying to you, I swear. Look, let's just talk about this. Can you put all of that down?" He just started screaming at me after that, telling me to shut up over and over again. Then Kyle charged at me out of the blue. I turned around and ran right out the door, but just before I was clear around the corner, I felt the glass bottle smash into my back, shattering and cutting me up pretty bad. I kept running though, until I was able to get away safely. I got back into my house and I locked the door. From there, I called the police. I'm sure the standoff between Kyle and the cops is a whole other story too, but unfortunately, I missed most of it. All I saw was them go in with 4 or 5 officers and come out carrying Kyle by the hands and feet, double bound in handcuffs and screaming bloody murder. As I found out, Kyle was smoking crack the entire time he was staying in my garage apartment, and he ended up getting so fried that he forgot he was just a guest that was supposed to leave after a week. After that, there was always a bad taste in my mouth every time I thought about letting another stranger stay on my property, so I canceled on all my bookings and deleted my account. I don't think I'll ever try my luck with it again. My husband and I travel often, and we've grown to prefer staying in Airbnbs over hotels. It's homier, more unique, and a more personal experience, which we used to like. Because rather than getting checked in by some soulless desk jockey, you would actually have a conversation with the host as human beings. However, our most recent stay in an Airbnb is likely to be our last. My husband and I have stayed in this specific Airbnb on 2 other occasions, and we really liked it. The decor was very warm and compatible with, shall we say, romantic adventures, I guess. We booked this Airbnb, which was half of a duplex, when we went to San Francisco to visit our old friends, who lived in a really nice community outside of the Bay Area. We spent a lot of time with those friends, but we loved having a place for us to spend some alone time that didn't feel like your average stale hotel room. We started to befriend the host, too. He's a single man about 35 years old who lives alone with his cats. My husband and I always noticed how enthusiastic he was about hosting us. He would invite us over to his side of the house for breakfast every morning, which we usually accepted because he was a surprisingly good cook. It was a bit strange to sit and eat with him though sometimes. He asked a lot of questions, most of which weren't that weird, but some of which were rather personal. For instance, he would ask us how long we'd been married. Then he'd ask us if we planned on making any children. I stressed that he just phrased it just that way, as in making children. Then he would ask if we've ever practiced the teachings of Kama Sutra, if we wanted any tips or advice or even help switching up things in the bedroom, at which point my husband would finally shut him down with a few stern words. We ran into awkward silences like that at least once every time we ate with the host, but we suffered through it because it was worth the delicious free food. Whenever it got tense, I would try to lighten the mood with a joke. One time, when the host had pressed us about our fertility in the bedroom, I tried to proudly declare that we definitely had all the bases covered to our liking. I was hoping that it would be a funny end to the subject, but it backfired. He started laughing hysterically, like way too intensely. He was even having trouble speaking. But he did eke out something that sounded like, "Oh, I know you do." The suggestion of an invasion of privacy really pissed off my husband, who stood up from his seat very abruptly and yelled at the host, demanding that he explain exactly what he meant by that. The host stopped laughing immediately, then stuttered around for a few seconds before eventually admitting that he had heard us making love through the walls the other night. My husband and I can be loud, so we were more or less forced to accept his explanation. That all happened the second time we stayed. The third time we flew out to see our friends, we were discussing where we wanted to stay, and my husband brought up all the weird things the host would say and suggested that maybe we should go somewhere else. Unfortunately, we looked around for other options and there just wasn't anything as high quality and affordable and in the right location, so we settled. Literally within minutes of making the reservation, the host texted us through the Airbnb app and he expressed an excessive amount of excitement, saying that he loved us and that he was so happy we were choosing to stay with him again. We kind of rolled our eyes and said, "Here we go again," but at the time it was still a little funny. When we arrived, the host tried to wait on us hand and foot, but we had gotten in late because our flight was delayed, so we were very tired and we asked to be left alone for the night. The host was seemingly sad about this for a second, but then as he walked away, he couldn't help but letting out this telltale smile creep up on his face. My husband didn't see it, but I did. I was about to mention it to him, but I was distracted by something when we walked into the bedroom. We noticed right away that it was different somehow, like things had been rearranged since the last time we were there. We talked about it for a few minutes, but I didn't think much of it and neither did my husband. We probably would have fallen asleep within a few minutes if we didn't realize that right after getting into bed that we hadn't made love in a few days. Because just from thinking about it and being back in that room, we got into the mood. I won't go into detail, but the long and short of it is that there was a lamp on the bedside table that wasn't there before. And because we weren't used to it being there, in our excitement, we knocked it over. The whole thing broke apart when it hit the floor, causing us to stop what we were doing to pick up the mess. However, my husband discovered something in the pile of broken ceramic. Something that had looked like a button just a few seconds ago. A spy camera. My reaction was to feel like I was about to throw up, but I've never seen my husband's face go flush with such intense rage so quickly. He got dressed and stormed out of the room, then broke down the door into the host side of the house and barged into his bedroom. I didn't follow, but I listened. My husband threatened to kill him if he didn't explain himself, after which there was an extended heated interrogation. I couldn't make it all out, but from what my husband tells me, he got the host to admit, through a great deal of crocodile tears, that he had been spying on us in the bedroom the entire time, and that he had just put up additional cameras when he knew we were coming again. We tried to get him to delete all the footage, but the worst part is that it was far too late for that. Because the host is such a perverted weirdo, he posted the footage he had of us to several porno websites, which essentially means there's no way of knowing how many people have seen us in our private time together, and there's practically no way of ever completely erasing the footage from existence if other people have already downloaded it. Needless to say, this ordeal ruined more than just our vacation with friends, and we are only in the beginning of the process of pressing charges. Otherwise, I would have been much more open to exposing every little detail pertaining to him as a way of getting revenge. But I'd rather see him rot in prison, so I'm going to do this the right way and keep this anonymous. There's a serious flaw in the Airbnb system. If it's somebody's first time hosting, how is anybody supposed to know what they might do? The first few people who stay with them are putting a lot of faith in somebody who's completely untested. I'm sure 99% of the time it's all totally fine, but then there's that 1%. In my own experience, that faith nearly got me killed, and it's left me deeply traumatized. It was my first time using Airbnb. I was going back to my hometown, but none of my friends had room for me to stay with them, and I don't exactly have the relationship with my family that makes staying with them a very viable option. Since there aren't many good hotels in such a small town like mine, an Airbnb seemed like the only good option. I didn't pay any mind to the lack of ratings for the place I picked and how the host had just joined the platform a week ago. I really didn't think it mattered. He was a fairly average looking guy, a middle-aged balding family man with enough money to own 2 properties. When I got there, I realized that it was a lot smaller than it initially seemed to be, only 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. The larger of the 2 bedrooms was the one I was supposed to stay in. It was in the back of the house with a window facing into the backyard. The host talked to me for a while before leaving. Strangely, even looking back, knowing everything I know now, in the beginning, he was completely unassuming of the person he turned out to be. Anyways, I went out with my friends the first night and I came back late and intoxicated, crashing on the bed pretty much immediately. I woke up sometime in the afternoon, hungover and groggy, pulling myself out of bed to get up and use the bathroom. But when I tried to open the bedroom door, it was locked. I turned the lock the other way, but it didn't make a difference. It still wouldn't open. I got a sinking feeling, but I was still in disbelief. Was it really locked from the other side? How is that even possible? Dumbfounded, I walked over to the nightstand to grab my phone, but it wasn't there. I knew I'd left it charging right there by the bedside, but it simply wasn't there. My mind was really starting to race. Maybe I'd left my phone in my luggage, I thought, but yet again, I was stumped when I looked for my bags in the closet and none of them were there. Panic and confusion were setting in deep. I started pacing around the room, just looking through the sheets and all the shelves and decorations, but the more I looked, the more it became clear that none of what I'd brought with me was in the room. I took a seat on the bed to try and calm my nerves. I was feeling claustrophobic in the room and at a loss for what I could do. I was also still hazy from the hangover and I was dehydrated with a splitting headache, and since I couldn't get out of the room to get any water, I thought to open the window and let in some fresh air. And then if I couldn't figure anything else out, I would just climb through. But to my horror, the window that looked out into the yard yesterday was now boarded up. My heart literally sank and I wanted to throw up all of a sudden. This can't be happening, I thought. Everything reached a boiling point and I snapped. Running to the door, I was trying to beat it down while screaming bloody murder for the host to come let me out. Then to my surprise, the door opened. But it came out swinging so fast that it hit me in the face and knocked me back. In came the host with a goddamn shotgun pointed straight at me. The look in his eyes and the tone of his voice. Everything about him was totally different. He had this twisted smile on his face like a true serial killer. And everything he said to me then, I'm forced to remember. So you're finally up? You were so out of it last night, you made it easy for me to come in and set up your room for what I plan to do with you. Hey man, let me go, you sick son of a bitch. I shouted back, only for him to level the shotgun square in my face. He just pretty much told me to shut up if I didn't want to make things worse for myself. I then eyed the open doorway behind him, seriously considering trying to make a break for it and get past him. But he saw where I was looking. I wouldn't try that if I were you, he said. The whole house is locked up. You and I are going to spend a lot of time here together. The sicko just laughed and smiled. I don't care about getting away with it. I've wanted to do something like this for as long as I can remember. I'm going to break you, he said. You'll suffer and suffer, and you'll beg me to let you go. First, you'll be mad. You'll threaten me. Then you'll say that you'll do anything I want. When that doesn't work, when your soul is totally ruined from everything I plan to put you through, you'll beg for the sweet release of death. Then, and only then, will I finally kill you. After that, I'm not sure how long I'll gloat over your shredded corpse, but eventually, I guess I'll take myself out too. I don't have any intention of continuing this life in prison. Everything he said hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt dizzy and I had to sit down. This amused my host. It's all settling in now, isn't it? He said with a smile. There's no way out of this for you. I struggled to even look at him, but I had to ask. Don't you have a family or someone to care of? His face turned sour when I mentioned family. Clearly they weren't around anymore. I don't have anything left to live for, he said, but you do. That's what will make this whole process enjoyable for me, watching you give up on it all. My friends will still wonder where I am, I said, suddenly finding the courage to say. They'll come looking for me. Yeah, and I'll know when they text you that our time is up, he replied. At which point, right when you think you'll be saved, you'll actually be doomed. Isn't that a beautiful twist of fate? He said. I fell silent. I still couldn't fathom what was happening. I barely even heard what he said next. A second later, he caught me off guard with the butt of his gun striking me square in the face. I didn't fall unconscious, but I was so dazed that I collapsed to the floor, and from there he continued to beat me and kick me in the chest. After he ran out of breath, he left the room and locked me inside once again. I spent the next eternity trapped in that room, while I had no clue if anyone was coming to help me. Every few hours he would come back in and torture me. I was beaten, strangled, cut, and raped relentlessly over and over again for 4 days. My feet and hands were broken so I couldn't move or fight back. I was bleeding internally and externally, and just like he said would happen, my mind was completely shattered. It got to the point that I almost wish he would have gone through with killing me at the end of it. However, I forgot that I told my friends where I was staying, and after I didn't come out to see them for a few days, they went looking for me. But unlike what the sicko said he would do, he squeezed out every last second of torturing me that he could. And when the police stormed his house, he blew his own brains out and left me alive. But then again, I really wish I wasn't. This story takes place in 2016 on a nice warm summer day. I was out for a walk, enjoying my time off from school and work, just getting some fresh air. Any time away from work and school was a good day for me. I didn't like the job I worked at very much, and I was a bit of a loner in school, and I didn't have many friends. I would get bullied quite frequently, so that right there, I suppose, would be more than enough of a good reason for me to hate school. Anyways, I don't want to get off topic here, so back to the story. I was walking through this trail, and I had been walking for just over 5 minutes, I'd say, when all of a sudden, I heard something in the woods. I genuinely didn't think much of it at all, as it most definitely wasn't uncommon to hear a squirrel, or maybe a bird or something every now and then. The sound continued for at least a minute, and the longer time went on, the more muffled the sound would become. Whatever it was clearly moving in the same direction as me, but much faster. I kept walking, still not thinking much of the situation. I was approaching a curve in the trail that took a sharp left turn, and almost as soon as I made it past the curve in the trail, that's when I saw him. There was a guy that was dressed up as a clown. I paused for a second, and I stood there just looking at him. He was standing directly in the middle of the trail. I don't know if you guys know about this or remember, but I'm sure you do. Just in case you don't, I want to briefly go over it. Back in 2016, there was a huge trend going around where people were dressing up as clowns all throughout the world, especially America. Most of them were just harmless teenagers who were being angsty and trying to scare people and get a good laugh or whatever. But there were people out there who had much more devious intentions. I've also heard some pretty horrible things that happened on the news, where clowns had been caught trying to kidnap or even physically harming innocent people. Anyways, I was taken aback by this when I saw the clown face to face, but I didn't want to seem like I was scared. because if he did have ill intentions, which honestly I highly doubted at the time, I didn't want to give him what he wanted, which was to scare me, obviously. He didn't seem to be armed either, so I was sure I could take him should he try to pull something crazy, like try to hurt me or whatever. We made awkward eye contact for a moment, and neither of us said a word. Not until I worked up the courage to ask him who he was. "Hello, who are you?" That was all that was said. At this point I realized it was probably time to go. The man was staring at me still and hadn't moved a muscle. He then began walking towards me and I took a few steps back. Remembering that I didn't want to seem scared, I said screw it and began walking towards him as well. As we were getting closer to each other, my heart rate increased more and more. He seemed to stop when we were right next to each other, but I kept walking, all while not looking back, not even once. I then chuckled to myself when I realized I fully made it past him and he was completely out of sight, because I realized I got all worked up for nothing. Anyways, I finished with my walk and I didn't see the clown again for the rest of my walk. Fast forward to the evening, I was sitting at home making dinner, when all of a sudden, I thought that I heard something come from outside. I opened the sliding glass door that was in my living room and stuck my head out and scanned my backyard with my eyes. Nothing. There was nobody at all in sight. There were many blind spots that someone may have been hiding, mind you, from where I was positioned, but I chalked it up to be just my imagination and that I was overthinking. I shut the door and locked it and continued making dinner. It couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 minutes later that I heard an aggressive heavy sounding knock that came from my kitchen window. I quite literally jumped out of fear and I hit my head on the cupboard that was above me. That was when I legit started to have a panic attack. Let me tell you, I didn't know fear until this moment. This was by far the most frightened I had ever felt in my life. I grabbed the knife that was sitting next to me on the counter and I tried to look out the window, but it was too dark for me to see anything at all. I rushed to my back patio light and I turned it on immediately. The second I turned on the light and before I was about to open the sliding glass door, I saw him. It was the same clown from earlier. He was standing right there on my back patio, only a few feet away from me. Looking back, I wish I would have ran out there and stabbed him or something, or at the very least scared him off, but I didn't. It's hard to say what you would do in a certain situation until you're in said situation, trust me. I ran upstairs to my room and I locked myself in the bedroom and proceeded to call the police. The knocking sounds continued and I could hear them all the way from upstairs. I had no idea who it was or why they were harassing me or how they even knew where I lived. But something tells me, even still to this day, that it was someone that knows me, which makes it all the more personal and scary if you ask me. I waited for the police to get there, which felt like an hour. They actually arrived fairly quickly though and made it here in less than 10 minutes, give or take. The knocking continued and it grew louder and louder as time went on. Then I about shit myself when the clown started laughing in this very delirious, insane type of laugh. I literally thought I was just waiting to die. I thought that at any second the man was going to break in and attack me, and that I was going to have to put up a fight. I thought to myself over and over how if he really wanted to, I'm sure he could just break through just about any of my windows in the house and let himself in that way. Finally, I heard police sirens in the distance, and they finally arrived only a handful of seconds after. One of the officers knocked on the door, and I rushed down there immediately to let him in. Of course, looking through the peephole first, to make sure it wasn't the clown. I let him in and I spoke with him, while the other officers searched for the clown. I couldn't believe it, but the clown was gone. Out of sight and out of mind, I guess. That's the way I like to look at it, because I haven't had a single incident ever since with any more clowns. Or anyone at all for that matter. Sometimes, even thinking back about this story, I can't believe that this in fact happened to me. You never think something this horrific will happen to you until it does. Things could have ended way differently hadn't the cops shown up so quick. In this case, these cops legit saved my life. This story also takes place back in 2016 in the clown era. I was sitting at home one night, lying in bed, looking at my phone before bed. It was late, and it was way later than I would usually stay up, but I remember that night I couldn't sleep for whatever reason. But luckily it was the weekend, so I didn't have to be awake at 5:30 in the morning the next day. I was lying there about to drift off to sleep when all of a sudden I got this strange feeling that I felt like I was being watched. Evidently I'm not insane and my intuition was correct, because when I put my phone down and looked around my room, as my eyes glanced over my bedroom window that was right next to my bed, I saw the face of a clown peering at me with his face up against the glass. Now of course, this scared the living shit out of me and I immediately screamed. I ran out of my room and I went to find my dad. He was actually awake to my surprise, probably because he heard me scream from across the other side of the house. I told him how there was a man dressed up as a clown in our backyard and that was why I screamed. I've always been terrified of clowns, but man, this mask that he was wearing was quite creepy and disturbing. It almost didn't even look like a mask, it was all too realistic. My dad, of course, ran outside looking for the clown, and he looked around outside for over 5 minutes, but there was no one to be found. Not a single clown or person in sight. My dad told me that I was just having a bad dream and to go back to sleep, but I told him I wasn't dreaming and that I was sure that there was really a clown there and that I'm not just losing my mind. There was no way it was a dream because I wasn't even sleeping. Besides, there was literally a whole entire outbreak about these clowns going on, all throughout the country. It kind of angered me that my dad wasn't taking the situation very seriously. I went back to my room and I grabbed a knife along the way, and I kept it beside me while I lied awake in bed once more, trying to get my anxiety straight. I even put a blanket over my window, that way the clown wouldn't be able to see inside, should he have come back. I lied there for just under an hour, I would say, and I started to feel better about the situation. Maybe I was just dreaming, I thought. Even though I could have sworn that I hadn't fallen asleep yet. Sometimes weird things happen in our sleep stages, and I'm aware of that. So I let myself believe that it was nothing, and that I was just letting it get to my head. Then, as I was finally managing to drift off to sleep for once, I heard this very light and faint tapping sound coming from my window. I immediately awoke in fight or flight mode, and I gained the courage to peek outside. I moved the blanket over to the side, and I poked my right eye out of the window, and I saw a man standing there dressed as a clown. I couldn't see exactly what he was doing, but it looked like he was trying to open the window. He was most definitely trying to kidnap me or something, no question about it. At this point, I knew I wasn't dreaming for 100% certainty. I didn't scream this time either, and I wasn't sure if he had saw me or not. I was hoping that he didn't notice that I saw him this time. That way he wouldn't be spooked and run off again. I rushed all the way to my dad as fast as I possibly could. He was sleeping this time, but I awoke him within seconds of arriving in his room. He followed me to my bedroom and looked out the window where the clown was, and there he was. The clown was still there, trying to break in. "Holy hell," my dad said. My dad told me to stay put and to call the police. Then he rushed outside, and when he found the clown, he was no longer by the window. He was standing directly in the middle of our backyard with a bat in his hand. My dad charged at him anyways, and the clown braced himself, ready for my dad's attack. As my dad got close enough, the masked man took a swing right for my dad, and somehow my dad managed to tank the hit to his side and disarm him. My dad started beating the literal hell out of this guy and was half near killing the man by choking him. My dad let the weird guy go, and only a few minutes later the cops arrived. We explained everything we could, the best we could, to the police, and they even went searching for him. But as far as I know, the police never turned up with him. We never had another incident like this ever since. I think that clown got the message from my dad loud and clear. I wish that weirdo would have gotten arrested though. But the most important thing is that nothing happened and that my father was able to protect me. I was only 14 years old when this happened, so that's why I couldn't really stick up for myself so much. My dad really is a true hero. My name is Edgar, and this happened last year. I was walking to a nearby carnival that was going on near my house last summer to meet up with my friends. The city has been doing this carnival for us every year, ever since I can remember. And I like to go at least once or twice a year. I'm one of those kids that likes to stay inside and play video games in my free time, so it's nice to get out and do something that's actually fun for a change. The town I live in has nothing fun to do at all. There is almost nothing to do. And all the other cooler and bigger cities are over an hour away. And I don't have my license yet. Nor do I have a whole lot of friends that would be willing to do this kind of stuff with me. Most of my friends are also introverted themselves, and we would much rather play our video games online, rather than actually go and hang out with each other in person most of the time. As antisocial as I am though, it's in our human nature to socialize. I get quite bored sometimes just sitting at home, so this was supposed to be us friends having a nice evening. When I got there and I found my friends, Nathan and Oscar, we rode some rides, played some of the carnival games, and even got ourselves some snacks. It was quite fun and we were all having a good time. After a little while, we kind of ran out of things to do, so we started pondering the idea of leaving and just going home. Nathan said he wanted to stay a little bit longer before we left, and I was okay with that, along with Oscar as well. So what do you guys want to do? I asked. Well, we could go see what's going on over there in that tent, Nathan said. There was a circus tent that we hadn't explored yet, and that was going to be the last thing we did before we took off, I imagined. So we headed over there, and when we got inside, we saw that there were a group of clowns performing on the stage. They were dancing, juggling, and one of them was riding a unicycle. We decided we wanted to get closer to the stage, so we made our way up to the front. After watching them for a little while, we were getting bored and we were about to leave. But just before we were about to leave, the clown that was riding the unicycle slipped and fell, and his red clown nose fell off and landed right next to me. I hurried to pick it up and I put it in my pocket, not thinking too much about it. I figured he had plenty more of those sponge-like noses, so I didn't think twice about taking it, and I really didn't think that the clown would care. He got back up and continued performing like nothing happened, after he made a quick joke about falling. I didn't think the clown noticed I picked up his nose until he turned his head and made prolonged eye contact with me. I thought that was weird and it kind of made me uncomfortable, but I figured he was just messing around. I told Nathan and Oscar that I was ready to leave and they agreed. Nathan's mom was already waiting for him in the parking lot and Oscar had to walk a completely different way to get home than I did, so we said our goodbyes and off we went. I took the clown nose out of my pocket and I was playing with it and just looking at it, because I had never seen one in real life before. I thought it was kind of cool that I had it because it was kind of like a souvenir for me to keep. Suddenly, I heard a slight chuckle. I had already been quite a ways from the carnival and all of the people. Or so I thought anyways. It really spooked me and jump scared me at first. It wasn't like a normal laugh, it had more of a sinister tone to it. It was extremely creepy. When I turned around, all I could see was a dark shadowy figure that looked like a person. I shined my flashlight over towards them and almost right away, I noticed that it was one of the clowns from the carnival.
I believe you have something of mine,
the clown said. The way he sounded when he said that was just absolutely petrifying. He barely sounded like a human, almost like an entity or a damn demon of some sort. Now, I'm not saying he was a ghost, all I'm saying was I knew right then and there that something horrible was about to happen. I slowly backed away and told the clown that I didn't have anything of his and to please leave me alone.
Well, if you aren't going to give me my nose back, I'm going to need yours then.
After that, he took out what looked like to be a Phillips screwdriver and pointed it at me. It was at that exact moment that I started running, as fast as I could, and I didn't look back once, literally. I ran through the woods rather than taking the road home because I knew a shortcut through the trails that led into my neighborhood. That might have been a risky move on my part, but I was thinking in the moment and I made a split-second decision. I'm not even sure how long he chased me for because that's how fast I ran. He was a bigger guy, so I doubt he could have ran as fast as me anyways. I told my mom exactly what happened when I got home, and she told me we should call the police. We called them, and they showed up to our house, and we talked about what happened to me. They said they couldn't do much as they had no idea what the man looked like. That really upset me because I feel like there was something we could have done. That clown most likely worked for some company that we could call and get a hold of, so we could find his real identity. But we were never able to find out who it was. I definitely won't be going back to that carnival ever again.